All right, friends, we're going to dive into 2.3. 2.3 is all about unemployment. There will be 3 or 4 calculations that we're going to do in 2.3, so make sure I have a calculator ready. And remember that everything we learn is conceptual, and then when we add math to it, we have to add all the labels and round to 2 or 3 decimal points, that sort of thing. So we're going to be talking about unemployment and what the economic definition of unemployment is, what the government definition of unemployment is, because I'm sure if we were in person right now and I asked you what is unemployment, you would say people who don't have a job. And that's only like a quarter of the correct answer. We're not going to do that. So in order to understand unemployment, you have to understand the term labor force and who is in the labor force. By the way, we are in your notes packet, and this is the little part that says who is in the labor force, and we'll get to unemployment here in a second. It kind of goes out of order. So who is in the labor force? To understand unemployment, you have to know who counts when we're counting. Because think about my son who's 5 years old. We're not going to count him in the unemployment rate because, of course, he doesn't have a job. He's 5. So we need to first figure out who is even available to work, and that's the labor force. So to be in the labor force, you have to be 16 years or older, able and willing to work, non-institutionalized. When I mean institutionalized, I mean you're not hospitalized, you're not in jail, you're not in some sort of mental health home, something like that. Not in the military. So people in the military are not considered to be under the umbrella of in the labor force. They're considered to be kind of institutionalized. People in school, that includes college and high school, you are considered not to be part of the labor force if you are not currently working. And people who are retired, like my mom, who retired after 30 years of teaching, she's not in the labor force anymore. So the labor force is our first calculation for the day, and you're going to write this down where it says labor force and it has a big blank. We take the number of employed people plus the number of unemployed people, add them together, and that's everybody who is available to work. And this doesn't include people who can't work for these reasons or are not going to work, people who are young, and over here, we're going to talk about this later, discouraged workers. Discouraged workers are people who can work, who were looking, and then gave up. Like they decided it was too hard, and were not able to find a job within the last 4 weeks. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics that is part of the federal government, they're the ones that do all these statistics, and they do them by month and release them for the previous month at the beginning of the next month. And they do a survey of about 20,000 people, and then they extrapolate 20,000 or 40,000, and then they extrapolate that data to make it representative of the whole United States. So again, they are statistics, and there are things that are wrong with statistics, and we'll talk about those later on, like what could be wrong or overstated or understated. What are the limitations of this economic indicator? And back to that word indicator means we study it to study the health of the economy. So if we're studying unemployment, it's a statistic we study to see, is the economy healthy? So back to discouraged workers. This is people who they give up and they live in their mom's basement and they live off their mom's money. They could work. They're healthy. They're smart enough. They're not in any sort of institution. They're not in school. They're not retired. They're not too young. They just gave up. And so those people are technically not in the labor force, which means our labor force numbers are sometimes wrong because those people could be working. They're just choosing not to. Okay, so now bob on back up to unemployment. Write this as your definition. In order to be considered unemployed by the government, you have to be 16 years or older, actively looking for a job, and don't currently have a job. So if you're working part-time, that doesn't count. I'm going to go ahead and write that down. Part-time workers doesn't count. People that are too young, they're not in the labor force, doesn't count. People that are retired or in the hospital, those people don't count because they're institutionalized, or in school, you're institutionalized. You have to be 16 years or older, looking for a job within the last 4 weeks, like Googling it, putting in an application, that sort of thing, and not currently working. Even if you're part-time but you want more hours, that doesn't count, okay? So there is a formula here for unemployment. To find this, in a minute, we're going to do numbers. You take the number of unemployed that you're given and divide it by the labor force. And remember, labor force is employed plus unemployed. So this is going to tell us the unemployment rate is not the percentage of everybody in America who doesn't have a job, because that would include my 5-year-old son. That would include the people in prison. That would include people who are part-time but looking for full-time work. The unemployment rate is the rate of people who are unemployed, who are actively looking for work, and they are able to work. So, another statistic, the next one right there, and I want you to write down this formula in that box where it says percent of the population in the labor force. This is another statistic that the U.S. government looks at, another indicator to see how healthy our economy is. Labor force participation rate is, we want a high number. We want the number of people, the percentage of people who are in the labor force to be a large number, because that means there's lots of workers available for work. So you would take your number in the labor force, which is, remember, it's employed plus unemployed, and you would divide it by everybody who could. Okay, so this is now people who are retired. This is now people who are in the military, people who are discouraged workers. This one does include discouraged workers. I'm going to write that, and you should maybe too, because those people show up in this bottom statistic. Discouraged workers show up in there. So it's going to tell us what percentage of people who could be working, they're 16 years or older, are actually doing it. And in America, the current, as of December 2026, the labor force participation rate is about 62.4% of Americans who could be working are working. Now, that does not include people who are not in the labor force. Well, yes, it does. So that is including like some retired people, that is including discouraged workers. It's a much more inclusive indicator. And again, we want it to be a high number. So we're going to real quick go through like a little practice of, are these people employed or unemployed? Oh, I made a typo. Let me fix it. Hold on. This is number 7, this is number 8, and this is number 9. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put all of these on the Google form. I'm going to give you some of the answers, but not all of them. Haha. So it's going to be multiple choice. Are these people employed, unemployed, or not counted? And then this last one is going to be a short answer, and you're going to tell me why. We'll get there in a second, okay? So your retired grandparent, are they employed, unemployed, or not counted in the unemployment rate? So a retired person is not in the labor force because they've taken themselves out. They're not employed, they're not unemployed, so they are not counted. All right, number 2, a 16-year-old high school student who applied for work. Do they meet the criteria? Remember the criteria for the unemployment rate. They have to be 16 or older, looking for work, and not actively working. So part-time doesn't count as unemployed. If you're part-time 20 hours, but you're looking for 40 hours. So let's see. Are they 16? Yes. Are they looking for work? Yes. Does it say that they're currently employed? No, they're not currently employed. So this person would count in the unemployment rate. Now that might apply to you. You might be a 16-year-old actively looking for work because you've put in a job application. That's how you answer number 9 then. But that doesn't mean that you can apply for government unemployment benefits. So don't try and do that. To apply for government unemployment benefits, you have to be not a dependent on somebody's taxes. So you can't do that. Sorry. You'd have to move out in order to apply for unemployment insurance. All right, number 3, a 16-year-old student who quits work for sports. So they were working at like Taco Bell, but then it was interfering with their basketball schedule, and all of a sudden they're not looking for work anymore. So are they unemployed? Are they 16 years or older? Yeah. Are they looking for work? Nah, they're not looking for work. So this person is not counted. Okay? All right, I'm going to do number 4, and then I'm going to make you do the rest by yourself. A single mom looking for a second job. Ooh. So, is she unemployed? Is she 16 years or older? We're going to assume because she's a mom. Is she looking for a job? Yes. Is she actively working? Yes, she is. So, she already has a job. So, she is not considered unemployed. She's considered E for employed. All right, I'm going to give you 5, 6, 7, 8 as multiple choice questions, and then you're going to do number 9 as a short answer. And you're going to tell me, are you employed, unemployed, or not counted, and why? And why in the short answer below. Okay, so we're going to bop on into the math portion of this. I'm going to do one, have you do one, do one, have you do the one, that sort of thing. You will need a calculator handy. So we have 3 formulas that are like in front of you. I would get a highlighter and just highlight the crap out of those. Your unemployment formula, your labor force formula, and your labor force participation rate. And they kind of go in that order. So in order to find all these, you need the first one, if that makes sense. So let's do the first one together. I'm going to switch to blue here. So labor force means who is working and who is looking for work. So that's employed plus unemployed. If it were to tell you on an FRQ to calculate, you would literally have to show. So 45 million plus 2 million is equal to 47 million. And I need to have a number with a label. What is this? Is the labor force. Okay, so check, found the labor force. Now my labor force participation rate, my formula is you take the number of people in the labor force, which is employed plus unemployed. Well, we already found that, 47 million, divided by all adults 16 years or older. We're now including the older people, the discouraged workers, that sort of thing. So 78 million. I'm going to get a decimal, and I get 0.6026. And I multiply times 100 because it's a rate. A rate means a percentage. And to get a percentage, you multiply times 100. Or you can just move the decimal point 2 places, boop, boop, and you get 60.26% labor force participation rate. So we want to round to whatever our statistic is. We want it to have probably 2 decimal points. 1 decimal point is okay. You would never round to a whole number. I would never take this and round to 60. They want you to be as accurate as possible without stressing yourself out. So if it's a rate, leave it at 3 or 4 decimal points, multiply times 100. All of a sudden, you're going to have 1 or 2 decimal points. If it's not a rate, it's just a number, leave it at 2 decimal points. And always have a label, labor force participation rate. Okay? Done. Now, what is my unemployment rate? So the formula for unemployment rate is the number unemployed, which is 2 million, divided by the labor force. And what number is that? 47 million. And I'm going to get a decimal again. I get 0.042. This is all times 100 because we're looking for a rate. So this is 4.2% are unemployed. And my number has to have a percentage, has to have a label if it is a percentage. So labor force is not a percentage. It's just a number. Participation rate, every time it says rate, you need that percentage. So I just taught you how to do 3 different statistics: labor force participation rate, and unemployment rate. I'm going to flip the slide, kind of show it to you, and then I'll take a picture of it and I'll put it on the Google form, and you can answer this one in the Google form. You don't have to show your work because it's a Google form. Just give me the answer and make sure it's right. Okay? All right, we're going to bop on to... No, I lied. I'm actually going to do this one with you. I lied. I'll make you do the last one by yourself. I'll do 2 with you and then do 1 by yourself. So remember, my labor force is employed plus unemployed. My labor force participation rate is, oh crap, what is it? Oh, labor force divided by 16 years or older times 100. I always remind myself the formulas before I even do the math. And that's a good test taking strategy to make sure that when the formulas are fresh on your mind, you go ahead and write them down. And my unemployment rate is number unemployed divided by the labor force times 100. Okay. Those are things that you have to memorize. They do not give you a formula sheet on the AP exam, just letting you know right now. So we're going to be having some formula quizzes when we get back in person. So if they tell me to calculate these things, I have to show my work. So what is my employed plus unemployed? My employed is 525,297 employed plus 12,679 unemployed, and I get my number is 537,976 is the labor force. Woohoo! And that's the number of people in the labor force. So that is my first answer. I'm going to move on to my second answer. My labor force participation rate is I take that number, 537,976, and divide it by all adults who are available to work, which is 2 million. Now, when I get that, I'm going to get a decimal. I get 0.27. I'm going to multiply times 100, and I get 27% is my labor force participation rate. And I did this earlier. I can't remember if I rounded. I maybe rounded too much on that. there might be a decimal point that you should have there, and I apologize for that. I don't have a calculator in front of me. I did this earlier. And then finally, my unemployment rate is my number of unemployed, which it gives to us 12,679 divided by my labor force, which I found in the very first problem. So you see how you have to get the first one right. You have to get the first one right, or you will get all of them wrong after that. And there's a hot chance I got these wrong too. So I got 0.024 times 100, and I get 2.4% is the unemployment rate, and there's my third answer. Boop, boop. And every number has a label, and every number that is a rate has a percentage next to it. I showed my work. And you're going to do the last one by yourself. I'll take a pic of this and you put it on Google Classroom. You don't not have to show your work. And we're not going to do this one. So moving on. So you have in your notes there, now that we've kind of done the math, you have the word part of this, the types of unemployment. So I'm going to explain the 3 types. You're going to take the words here and you're going to decide where they go. So you can pause, read the definitions, then listen to me and categorize them. 3 types, 1, 2, 3, you decide which is which. So I'm going to start with cyclical. And it is not perfectly in order. I'm explaining cyclical. You're going to match it to the definition in your notes. Okay. So cyclical unemployment is the bad type of unemployment. It is a type of unemployment that the government is worried about because it is indicative of 2 things. It means there's some sort of recession. Businesses are doing layoffs. Businesses are closing their doors. Purchases, consumer spending is down. I'm just going to put CS for consumer spending is down. And the whole economy is slowing down. Recession means to fall behind, to recede. And it technically is, the old definition was 2 quarters of negative GDP growth. GDP growth is down. Those are all examples. One other example, it could be cyclical if our economy has produced a person that is completely unemployable. They just have no skills at all. But that's very unlikely. If you see a cyclical question, it's going to be because of a recession. All right, structural is the middle one. Structural is the technology-based one. So you find this definition in your notes, match it to the correct one. This is when technology takes someone's job because their job becomes obsolete because a robot can do it or a computer can do it. And it's not bad for the economy, which kind of sucks to hear. You got laid off because a robot took your job, but that stinks for the person, but technically it means our economy is growing. So remember, one of the ways to increase our PPC, our production possibilities, was to increase technology. One of the ways to increase supply is to increase technology. And so, yes, it stinks that people might lose their job to technology and their skills are no longer needed. Sometimes that's called creative destruction. But it's technically good for overall as an indicator. And finally, frictional. Frictional is a temporary life circumstance. Boom, something happens. That's why they call it frictional. There's a life event. And essentially it's you are moving. You're not going to have a job for the whole month and a half you're moving, right? Because you got to quit your job, move all your stuff across the country, get a new job. You're not going to have a job the day you graduate college. There's going to be some downtime where you don't have a job. So these people are frictionally unemployed, not because they don't have skills, not because they're unemployable. They've proven themselves to be employable. They have a college degree. They have education. They're just in between jobs due to life circumstances. So I gave you the 3 types. I want you to fill them in, match them to the definition based on what I say, and then let's move on. So students often ask me, Ms. Keller, why don't we have 0% unemployment? In fact, in America, it's probably best for us to have anywhere from 3 to 6% unemployment. And 0% unemployment would actually be bad for our economy. So I want you to imagine a world where there was 0 unemployment. There is no cyclical, there's no recession, there's no structural, there's no technology taking people's jobs, and there's no frictional. There's going to be lots of people working. There's going to be lots of people having money and spending money. Spending money is going to make consumer spending go up. GDP is going to go up. And doesn't that sound great? But as we demand more, think about a supply and demand graph, then the prices are going to go up. If prices go up, because consumer spending went up, then input costs will go up. If input costs go up, then supply will go down, then prices will continue to go up. So what's going to happen to the price of products if everybody is employed? Prices are going to go up. Inflation is going to happen. So we're not actually shooting for 0% unemployment. We're shooting for 3 to 6% unemployment in America. And then what about this? If we don't allow frictional unemployment, what happens if you don't like your job? Too bad. Can't quit. Can't move. You're stuck because you're not allowed to be unemployed. What if we don't allow structural unemployment? What will happen to our economy over time? If we don't allow structural unemployment, then technology isn't taking people's jobs. We're not furthering production because we're not increasing new technology. So this is a big nope. We want some people unemployed. The trick is to get it right, the right number and the right type of unemployment. And so we call this the natural rate of unemployment. So I'm dipping into the next part. I'm on the next page now where it says natural rate of unemployment. I'm going to explain it to you and then kind of show you the examples of it. And pardon me, I'm walking to my iPad charger because she's about dead. So when I'm talking about natural rate of unemployment, what type of unemployment is considered to be good is what this is talking about. So cyclical, we've already decided is not good because it's indicative of a recession. We definitely don't want a recession. Structural is fine. Sucks for the people that lost their job, but it's fine because it means our economy is growing. Sorry, I'm hooking this up to the charger. And then frictional is a natural type of unemployment as well. No, don't die. Because temporary life circumstances will mean that people are out of jobs. So when we are calculating the natural rate of unemployment, this is where your where your definition is right there. It is frictional plus structural unemployment. So if we were to write out a formula, it would literally be frictional plus structural. Okay. And it's okay for those numbers to be around. And again, in America, we hit around 3 to 6% unemployment. So let's say the number of unemployed people total is about 6% in America. That means that frictional and structural together are about 6%. So this is 4 and this is 2%, okay? And we're still at a good rate. Now, if we add in cyclical, that's when it becomes unnatural, and that's an unemployment rate that we don't have. And actually, I wrote down the statistic. Where did I write it? The current unemployment rate in America in 2026 December was about 4.4%. So we are within our goal in America. It's not for every single country. Of 3 to 6% unemployment is considered to be natural as long as that unemployment is frictional or structural. Sorry, I got to find my notes again. Okay, so we're going to combine this with what we call full employment output. So on a graph later, unit 3, we're going to call this Y on the graph. It gets so confusing. But essentially, here's what this means. When our economy is rocking and rolling and we only have these 2 good types of unemployment, we call that amount of GDP the full employment output. So there's no cyclical. Like in this little statistic that I made up, there's no cyclical unemployment. That means our economy is technically operating at max capacity. We're at full employment. And I know that's so weird to hear that we call it full employment when there are unemployed people, but it's because we kind of ignore those good types of unemployment. They're allowed to happen. We call it that we are less than full employment if we introduce that cyclical unemployment. So the next thing on your note says 0% unemployment. Already covered that, why we don't want 0% unemployment. So we're going to do a little bit of math, and actually I've kind of already done it for you. I'm going to do one, and then I'm going to have you do the next one by yourself. Yes, I will. Okay, so I've kind of already done it for you. If you were to be asked on the AP exam to calculate the natural rate of unemployment, this is how we would go about it, or the unemployment rate. So we're given a bunch of numbers here. So the numbers that we're given are employed, the number of people who have a job, and these three all get added together, and that is the number of unemployed. So again, we got to be able to recognize those things, that these three things are types of unemployment, and we add them together, and that is our number unemployed. So if we want to find the unemployment rate, remember the unemployment rate is, let me write it down, is the number unemployed divided by the labor force. We got to find the labor force first. So this is where it gets really, really confusing. So I'm going to take the number unemployed, which is this number. It's going to be 1,900. And I'm going to plop it on top right here. And you see how I added and I showed the AP people when I'm doing an FRQ. This is 400 plus 700 plus 800. Okay. That all ends up being 1,900. And then on the bottom, I need my labor force, which is unemployed plus employed. So I add those together. I'm going to get some sort of decimal. I'm sorry, I did not write it down. And then you multiply times 100 and you get that. Oh my God, Miss Keller got it wrong. I forgot my percentage. Y'all do not forget that percentage because it is a rate. We multiply times 100. We got to have that percent sign. So 7.06. So how did I get that? They just gave me cyclical, structural, frictional, and employed. I had to remember my earlier statistics of, well, what is the labor force? How do I find the unemployment rate? Now, what is the natural rate of unemployment? And this is where we're taking the old indicators we learned 5 minutes ago, and we're just doing natural unemployment. So if we want just the natural rate of unemployment, we need to take cyclical out of the picture. Pretend it doesn't exist for a second, just in the top. So if we want to find the natural rate of unemployment, we find those naturally unemployed, beep, 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 and divide by the labor force. So those cyclical people, they still show up in the labor force. So this means that our natural rate of unemployment is 5.58%. Notice how 5.58, the government would consider this one to be an okay rate of unemployment because it has no cyclical. Okay, but once we add that cyclical in there, you see that rate goes up. There's more people unemployed than what we want. And these numbers are true to America, where we want it in that 3 to 6% range. And if we get above that 3 to 6% range, then the government starts taking action to try and reduce unemployment. Again, that is just for America, and that's not going to be in every single problem on the AP exam. I'm just telling you like some real life stuff. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to do this one by yourself on the Google form. You don't have to show your work, but remember, I'm asking you for a rate. So you need to have an answer, you need to have a percent, and you need to have a label on both of these questions, this one and this one, kind of doing the same thing that I just did. Okay, another way they might present the unemployment rate to you is this way with some percentages. So I'm going to do that one real quick for you and then make you do one on a Google form like that as well. So this is asking for what is our unemployment rate and what is our natural rate of unemployment. So the unemployment rate is going to be all the types of unemployment. So all I got to do is add all these up, but I got to show my work. So it would be cyclical 5% plus structural 3% plus frictional 7%, and we're going to get a 15% unemployment rate. Okay, and I have a number, I have a percent sign, and I have a label. All right, what about natural unemployment? What would be the goal for our country to be at? Because it's just structural or frictional. We would take the structural 3% plus the frictional 7%, and we get a 10% natural rate of unemployment. Meaning that for this country, this is not the United States, but for this little baby country that I made up, they would be okay with an unemployment rate of about 10%. They consider it to be natural because they take out that bad type of unemployment and they only count the ones that aren't so bad. That would be kind of bananas in real life for America. All right. So here's another one, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you this one's kind of a trick question, but I want to see if you can get it. Remember, unemployment rate is going to be all the types of unemployment, and natural rate of unemployment is going to be the two types that are considered not bad for the economy, more natural. Okay, so real quick at the bottom, we have now made it to the bottom of, no, we're almost to the bottom. We have criticisms of the unemployment rate here in a second, but in the bottom, you have a bunch of blank space on your notes. I want you to give me a production possibilities curve. Real quick, as I talk, go ahead and do it. Give me an X and Y axis. Label your vertical axis capital goods, your horizontal axis consumer goods, and make it an increasing cost curve, meaning curvy, like that. Does that make sense? And remember when we did points on the PPC a while ago and we did like a point here and a point here and a point here and a point here and a point here? This is the same exact thing, except now we're going to pretend that the natural rate of unemployment is between 4 to 6%, meaning our full employment output, our max production possibilities curve, includes some unemployment, about 4 to 6. I want you to put a polka dot on that 3 polka dots, 3 little points on this curve showing me where you think these might be. And I'm going to give you a second and then I'm going to show you the answer because I want you to get it right. So where you think these might be. Where would an unemployment rate of 8% be on our production possibilities curve? Would it be on the line, under the line, or above the line? Where would a point of 5% unemployment, remember the target is 4 to 6%, that would be our max capacity, be on the line, under the line, or above the line? And where would a point of an unemployment rate of 1% be? On the line, above the line, or under the line? Okay, here's your answers. So in this economy, the goal was just pay attention to the red right now. The goal was 4 to 6%. So anything 4 to 6% would be on the line. That would be, we're efficient, we're using all resources. This would be considered full employment. I'm saying full employment with quotation marks because it actually includes some unemployment, just frictional and structural. This would mean there's lots of cyclical unemployment. We are above that 4 to 6 target. This would be that 8% target, 8%, which is above the target unemployment, which means we are underutilizing some of our resources, some of our labor. And then C would be above the line with 1% unemployment. We don't have the resources. We don't want that in our economy. And then I drew this on there. Well, I didn't. I graphed it on there. 0% unemployment would be like crazy town. We can't reach that, and we don't want to reach that because of inflation. Okay? All right, last bit, I'm going to explain these a little bit, and you can decide which is which, match it to the definition in your notes, then write down some examples that I say. So again, they're not in order on your notes. You just got to listen and figure out which is which, and then write down some examples, kind of like a matching. So we have unemployment is an indicator. An indicator means it's something we study to see if the economy is doing well. So there are some criticisms of it. There are some limitations to studying it. One limitation is part-time workers don't count in the unemployment rate. So if you are a part-time worker, you might consider yourself to be underemployed. You're looking for a full-time job or another part-time job to hit that 40-hour a week or 50-hour a week, whatever you want to work, and you can't find it, but you don't count in the unemployment rate. So you got tons of part-time workers, think like Uber and Lyft drivers doing gig work, who are unable to make ends meet at the money they're making, but can't find another job, but they don't count in the unemployment rate and they can't file for unemployment. So those are called underemployed workers. Next would be, sometimes underemployed also means like people who have really awesome skills, who can't find a job in their field. So like, if there were no teaching jobs, but I had a teaching degree and I go and like flip burgers at McDonald's, I'm underemployed, right? I could be doing a lot more. I'm not reaching my own production possibilities there. So that's an example of underemployed, like too educated for your current position. All right, discouraged workers. Discouraged workers are people who are no longer looking for a job. They've given up. It's like your cousin and living in your aunt's basement, your uncle who's never worked a day in his life, like those sort of people. They are not included in all these statistics. So when you take out those people from the unemployment statistics, like let's say the unemployment rate is 7%, and then like 2% of those people drop out and become discourage workers and like stop looking for jobs, even though they're like able-bodied and able-minded. Now our unemployment rate is 5%. Wow, it looks so much better, but it's not actually so much better. Those 2% of people just gave up. They haven't been looking for employment in the past 4 weeks, and they're living off of somebody else. I know that's really harsh to say, but if you do not have a job, then you are living off of somebody else's labor. And it's true. You guys are doing that right now, probably. You're living off your parents' labor. They pay for your house. They take care of you. And there are people out there who are not working, who are living off of someone else's labor. And so they're not included in the unemployment rate, and it kind of inflates the unemployment rate when more people give up. Inflates or deflates, I guess, makes it look better when people give up looking for work, but that's not a good thing. And then finally, the unemployment rate is just a statistic. It's not perfect. If we just say the overall unemployment rate, that you are like leaving disparities for like minorities, people of color who maybe can't find a job as quickly as others due to discrimination. Teenagers, people who are 16, 17, 18, maybe even people who have gone to college, they're in school and they're looking for a job and can't find one, but because they're looking for a job or have a part-time job and looking for another one, but because they're teenagers and we view them to be younger, or they're still in college, or they're still in school, the unemployment rate just doesn't account for that as much. And finally, what was I going to say? Oh, I was going to give an example. So one example that we have, the Bureau of Labor Statistics hasn't been around forever, but it has been around for a while. And they didn't start counting minorities in the labor statistics until the 70s. They didn't even start counting like women unemployment statistics, women within these statistics, until the 60s as well. So we have to keep that in mind. When we are talking about the Great Depression, our biggest recession in U.S. history, the most like gone backwards in GDP growth, most unemployment, that sort of thing. We're looking at about 1 in 4 men were without a job, meaning the unemployment rate was about 25%, they think, 24.7% of white men were looking for a job and couldn't find one. But notice how I said of white men. So when we say the unemployment rate in the Great Depression was 25%, that doesn't include people of color. That doesn't include women. So there are some people that theorize that the unemployment rate was actually so much higher because it didn't account for race and age inequality at that point. Nowadays, our statistics includes that. All right, I'm going to have some multiple choice in the Google form, and we're good now. Thank you.